facilities. Thank you.
Let's do as we always try to open up a second round of representatives of the political groups, 1 minute each, so that the three panelists, the three guest speakers will have more than enough time to provide answers for the questions that have been raised. First floor to Tomás Tobé. Are you connected? 1 minute, please. 1 minute. Make it in 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the speakers of today. My question goes to Commissioner Johansson. I think we can all understand the kind of tension and the pressure that we see on the Canary Islands. You stated very clearly that you want the key principle of the pact implemented, that we need to strengthen the partnership with third countries. And I think most of all can agree with that as well. But what I wonder is, what kind of new initiatives will we actually see from the Commissioner to have some progress in the short term? Because for me, it's clear that the Spanish government is not doing enough to ease the situation in the Canary Islands. And yes, we also need to do more from the European level. But what concrete initiatives will we now see from the Commission? Because this is about the trust of the whole European asylum system, and we need to ease the situation in the Canary Islands. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Pietro Bartolo. Collega Bartolo. Onorevole Bartolo.
Sì.
Ecco.
Sì, grazie, buonasera. Grazie.
Yes, thank you very much and good evening. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. I'd also like to thank President Torres and Mrs. Galan. It seems clear to me that the current situation on the Canary Islands... Oh, just a moment, Pietro. I'm being told by the interpreting booth that we'd like to be able to see your face a little bit better. Could you just adjust your camera so we can see your face properly? Is that any better? Well, a little bit lower? Okay, now we can see your face. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I was just saying that I think that the current situation in the Canary Islands is simply the result of a clumsy effort to transform our union into a fortress Europe. If we are going to be preventing some routes from working, then we simply force them to other routes. People's desire to get to Europe will always be stronger than any efforts that we have to outsource our border controls. What's being proposed is a system that's based on the same approach. We can't continue to create pressure on the countries of entry. That would directly lead to violations of migrants' rights. There's no compromise solution. We need a fully automatic binding relocation mechanism that starts immediately. Well, Commission, what measures have you taken to support the Spanish government in better managing the migration situation? How can we ensure that we can support the local population, which is in a terrible situation?
Por un minuto en esta segunda ronda para que pueda haber tiempo de respuesta a nuestros oradores. Maite Pagasartundo, for Renew.
Sí, telegráficamente.
Yes, very briefly, I'm going to try and be very constructive. What's happened with regard to the Canary Islands between October and December should have been considered an emergency crisis. And it could have been if the European Commission's plan had already been adopted, but that isn't the case, and we've heard the terrible things that President Torres has said to us. But we do need to improve transparency. There's a massive variety of figures which obscures what's happening. We've heard about 15,000 migrants in the islands. We don't exactly know where they're trying to go or what they're doing. We don't know how many people have asked for asylum in Spain. Is there anyone who's been sent back to their country of origin? Is there anyone who has asked for asylum elsewhere in the European Union? We need to ensure that information is clear. Reporters Without Borders has several times talked about pressure being put on journalists to prevent them doing their job. It's only when we have correct information that as a society we will have the appropriate awareness so that we can find solidarity across Europe. It's the Council that needs to unblock the migration package, but if we don't know exactly what's happening, if there's no transparency from the Spanish government, all we get is an increase in disorder, chaos and impunity. And things will simply continue to get worse.
Danke für die Grüne. Damian, in Verbindung. Damian?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Torres and Mrs. Galan, for coming and speaking to us today. I have to say that I'm quite shocked by the situation that we see here, because it reaffirms that our current approach just seems to be basically deterrence by suffering. And that cannot be our European values. That cannot be the way we want to go about this. And I see again basically an approach centered on return, on large reception centers, as so-called pilot projects. I see basic rights deteriorating, and I see actually quite an open local population on the islands that is currently being pushed again to be less open and to basically live with a suboptimal situation. So my question to Mr. Torres would be: would you, or do you already see positive signs from other, let's say, cities across Europe and also in Spain that would like to basically offer their voluntary support? And to Commissioner Johansson, I mean, what will our approach be this time? Will it be again to just build large reception centers, or can we actually hope for real solidarity in this case of the Canary Islands? And Mrs. Galan, what can we do to ensure that basic rights, that the reception conditions do not deteriorate further? Thank you very much.
Thank you. For ECR, Asita Kanko. Asita, you got the floor. Asita, yes.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Chair. We've been warned for some time by Frontex, Europol and others that all smuggling routes shut by COVID would simply shift elsewhere. We all understand the hopes and fears that drives a person to make this perilous journey. But we also understand the ruthless greed that drives the criminals that facilitate it. By allowing this business model to continue, economic migrants without a legal right to stay in the EU are placing an overwhelming burden on reception facilities in Europe and placing genuine refugees at the back of the queue. Tackling human smuggling and trafficking must be at the heart of our EU asylum reforms. New screening procedures and more funding can only achieve so much. We need strategic partnership with third countries to combat criminal gangs. We need better cooperation arrangement with foreign governments to increase returns. We need targeted humanitarian aid for refugees camps in conflict regions. And we need reinvigorated trade policies with African nations. Unless we acknowledge this, then our system is doomed to be broken forever. Compassion without common sense is not a good enough policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the GUE, Fernando Barrena. Tiene la palabra, por favor. Conectado.
Sí, gracias, presidente. Gracias a los comparecientes.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank our speakers as well. Last December, various members from our group made a short visit to Gran Canaria, and we met various of those working with migrants coming to the Canary Islands. Now, unfortunately, the Ministry of the Interior wouldn't let us go into the camp, and this raised concerns among us with regard to the conditions there, because it looked as though something was being hidden. We also saw various minors at the entrance to the camp who shouldn't be there. So we have thousands of migrants being held in those facilities for weeks when the maximum is 48 hours. And in addition, there was no legal assistance being provided with interpretation in situations where confidentiality could be guaranteed. So these migrants only received assistance very, very late. So, Commissioner, are you aware of the situation that we saw? And do you not believe that the fact that these migrants aren't receiving legal assistance pursuant to the law, isn't that something that is problematic when it comes to expelling them from EU territory. Thank you.
Miembros en la sala.
I see members in the room who have asked for the floor. Dominique Reservesa, a minute, please.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I'd particularly like to thank our speakers today. The first thing I'd like to say is that what Mr. Soido said really was something that drew my attention. It seemed to me to be a criticism of the President of the Canary Islands rather than a contribution to an exchange of views on the issue. So I'd like to express my solidarity to the President of the Canary Islands, but also to the society of the Canary Islands as a whole, hotel owners who have provided facilities for migrants, for some families who've taken in migrants, some poor families as well. Also solidarity to, I'd like to provide my solidarity to NGOs who have done everything possible to improve the difficult situation of migrants in the Canary Islands. And now we move to the European dimension of the issue. We don't want to see more Lesbos and Lampedusas. And it's the European Union which has to provide support because the Canary Islands, Spain, Malta, Italy, these are external borders of the European Union. So I note the intervention made by Mrs. Galan. I think what she says is very important and needs to be taken account of. But here I turn specifically to Commissioner Johansson, because I think there is a new migration and asylum pact on the table. It doesn't, however, include obligatory mechanisms of shared responsibility. And given that, it's not really going anywhere. And I think the Canary Islands shows that very clearly. So I would urge the Commission not to give Mr. Orban a veto on this issue, because a package including obligatory relocation can be adopted via qualified majority. Thank you.
25 minutes to go before the end of this timing, before the end of this slot for this particular point of the day in the agenda of the LIBE Committee. So I suggest back to our three panelists, our three speakers in a row, 7 minutes each. Can you make it just to react to the questions that have been raised by the members which have taken the floor? First floor goes to you, Commissioner Johansson. If you're there, please make it. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for your contributions. I think this was a very good exchange and a lot of engagement from parliamentarians. I think that's very promising. First, I would like to answer a question actually from Mr. Torres, and that was about the funding that is needed. For the support from the European Commission and the solidarity that we need to show is partly about funding, not only. So as I already explained, the Commission has already funded 70 million euros, and that's why we've been able to fund these 5 facilities for the migrants that are now have been opened recently, some of them actually. But we also need a long-term funding. And now we are in the process of working together with the Spanish authorities for the new programs, for the new MFF in the area of migration. And from the Commission side, we insist that these new programs should be prepared in partnership with the autonomous regions, the autonomous communities. I think this is really important. And that means also that this money can go together with the money that are already being managed directly by the autonomous communities like ESF Plus and European Regional Development Fund. I think this is important. I was asked by several of you MEPs on what had the Commission done? So first, I already said this, I was in the port of Aguiguin, and I saw, of course, that this was totally not a sustainable situation. That's why we have funded these new reception facilities. That's also why the EU agencies have stepped in. So for the first time, we had only 1 month ago a new commitment being signed between EASO and Spain to support for the asylum reception system and capacity building. And of course, EASO is ready to step up even more. We also had the cooperation of Frontex on the Canary Islands, but also now a new joint operation that has been also signed quite recently. And of course also Frontex is ready to step up and help. And they're also working together with Senegal, for example, in some arrangement there. So these are important aspects. So I think it's necessary to show this kind of concrete solidarity and initiatives directly from the Commission. But that is not enough, because many of you have also touched upon this issue that there is a reason why people are coming right now and why they're using this route right now. And part of that is, of course, the economic impact that the pandemic has had in several countries. So it's important when we work with partner countries, it's not only about migration. Migration is one part that we need to cooperate on, but also to help partner countries to recover economically from the pandemic, and to, of course, help people to have better opportunities in their own country. And, of course, also to fight the criminal networks of smugglers. I think this is really important, that people should not risk their lives on these dangerous routes. But if we would like to be successful in fighting the irregular arrivals, and I think this is really important to do so, then we need to open up better and easier legal pathways to the European Union. And that's why we need to work specifically with these partner countries in Africa on legal pathways for economic migration that has to come in an orderly way to the European Union, and not through smugglers and criminal networks and risking your lives and putting also a lot of difficult situation, like right now in the Canary Islands, for example. And also, I think you all know about the pact that I presented, where we propose that we should have a more Europeanized migration system and asylum system that really shows that when you come to the European Union, if you come to the Canary Islands, you come to the European Union, and wherever you come to the European Union at our different member states. So that is what we propose in the pact, that we should have more of a European system that could have also common standards for how people are being received and how they are being processed. And as you know, in my proposal, I propose a mandatory solidarity. I think it's necessary, and I think it shows that we really need that. Today we are depending on voluntary solidarity, and I think it's very clear should be to everyone that this is not enough. We need a mandatory solidarity mechanism, and we need to work close with our partner countries. I think I touched upon most of the things that have been raised here and question put to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Johansson, and thank you for the efforts. I'm well aware that the technical difficulties keep being there, and you have taken the bother to make yourself reachable. You have reached out to us. We hope we reached out to you too. Thank you. Thank you for being there. Now, Presidente Ángel Víctor Torres, del Gobierno de Canarias, tiene la palabra para...
You have the floor now, Mr. Torres, the President of the Government of the Canary Islands, to respond to the questions and comments made by members of the committee. Thank you very much to all those who took the floor and those who asked questions. Let me begin by saying I ended my intervention by quoting the President of the Canary Islands 15 years ago, who was involved in a similar hearing. Now, I would say to members of the committee that we're not members of the same political party. He is a member of a political party that rivals mine. We are the parties that have the largest numbers of elected representatives in the Canary Islands. But in 2006, when he spoke to your committee, I was the mayor of a small town in the Canary Islands. Now, I was called back at the time because I was mayor of that municipality, and back in the day we showed solidarity. We helped by providing resources to the government of the Canary Islands at the time to help with the situation. Now things have changed, I know now. They changed with the pact in 2008, and now we're in government. So I concluded by saying we needed to correct any possible errors. And we needed to be clear on the questions that were being asked, but also the responses. I mean, we're always going to be located at less than 100 kilometres than Africa. Our geographical location won't change. So we're always going to have migrants coming to the Canary Islands. But knowing that that's where we're located, well, that's what we have to base ourselves on. And we shouldn't forget that we are part of Europe in spite of our geographical location. So we need a shared response in line with human rights, ensuring that those people who come looking for a better life are looked after appropriately, and we need a European Union that acts as a model. I would ask those who were critical to ask their colleagues in the European Parliament to ensure that the new text is as fair and balanced as possible. Moria, Lampedusa, the Canary Islands, you need to show empathy to these regions. We are elected representatives, and we are asking other autonomous regions in Spain to show solidarity and help us and stand with us. I'm grateful for the funds that have reached us from Spain and the European Union to help us. And when it comes to unaccompanied minors, well, the budget has come from the government of the Canary Islands. So obviously we need help because we've got a lot of people, but we need assistance that is appropriately regulated and is based on obligatory solidarity, obligatory binding solidarity, co-responsibility, as the Commissioner said. And we need to say the same thing in the Canary Islands, in Brussels, in Madrid, or anywhere, because hearing people talking about an invasion of migrants, and here I would say to you, Mr. Bouchardet, are you suggesting that people, that all the people who are coming stay in the Canary Islands? Is that your idea of solidarity? So, I think we need to be clear in our response. People talked about people being deported. I was asked how many. Well, far fewer than in 2006, 2007, because we've had closed air spaces as a result of the pandemic. We've got difficulties in Africa because they're suffering. They have difficult economic and civil situations. There are also conflicts ongoing. And obviously the pandemic. So there are fewer deportations than there were in previous years. For months, these migrants have had to stay in the Canary Islands because sea and air links to the African continent were closed. In addition, obviously, we have to act in line with international law. We can't call international law into question. People can transit in a legal manner, and that is a legal right, whether you're a migrant or not. So we can't stop that happening. We have to invest in countries of origin. We have to deal with people trafficking mafias, but we also have to preserve human rights. Those people who board small vessels to try and migrate are the victims of a world that we want to improve. So when the European Union approves the redistribution of funds to member states which are affected by the economic crisis caused by the COVID crisis, well, that's great, but we need to do exactly the same thing when it comes to the migration crisis. 15 years have passed, and we still haven't responded to the situation as it was then. I see criticism, but how have we managed to return to the same situation? I mean, obviously, we're always going to have migration in the Canary Islands. It's not something that we've simply ignored for the last 10 years, because migration is a part of human history. What we need to do now, when it comes to the Migration Pact, is come up with the best possible text. To conclude, let me say that I think we should do what we did in 2006. Perhaps some political groups or those who come from the centre of Europe aren't really aware of what's going on, but I think you need to show empathy to those of us who are on the periphery. Together, we need to avoid errors and make every effort, putting aside our ideological differences. Migration is not politics. We're talking about people, individuals who are suffering. So we need the best possible text so that we can all feel proud of the outcome. Thank you. Thank you, President Torres, for giving us the point of view of the Canary Islands and the situation on the Atlantic route to the European Union via the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands is obviously a part of the European Union, and migrants who go to the Canary Islands are obviously aiming to get to the European Union. There's no reason why they should stay in the Canary Islands. They're obviously not going to want to do that. It's their dream to get to Europe, and they've risked their lives, and some even lost it, in pursuit of their dream. And this is obviously the most dramatic aspect of the most dangerous route to the European Union. Mrs. Estrella Galan, now, you have the floor so that we can conclude on this second round of speakers. You have the floor for 7 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. Well, there were a lot of questions raised, and it's very difficult to deal with them all, but I would like to respond to the issue raised by Member Dietmar when he asked how many people had drowned in the Atlantic. We're talking 600 people, 600 identified cases, because we know that many people couldn't be registered because they simply disappeared without trace at sea. So the number could be twice as large. But these deaths are the result of the fact that there are no legal ways to migrate, and I welcome the fact that Commissioner Johansson mentioned the importance of legal and safe ways for migration. That's something we've been calling for decades now, because it's the only way to put an end to people trafficking. I mean, they can only benefit if there are no alternatives. Europe has been turning itself into a fortress, as we heard from Mr. Bartolo, and while Europe continues to do that, the mafias will continue to do their business. So in the new pact, it is essential for there to be safe and legal ways for that people can use to migrate. And they need to actually work. They shouldn't simply be words on paper. Now, there was also a question to the President of the Canary Islands with regard to stopping extremist groups using hate speech, etc. Well, unfortunately, we've heard some pretty unpleasant things even today in the European Parliament. I think there needs to be a code of conduct for members of Parliament and elected representatives in order to put an end to that. It's possible to lie here by saying there's been an increase in criminality since migrants arrived, in spite of the fact that the government has released figures that show that rates of crime have actually gone down. So please, Mr. Bouchardet, please be more responsible in what you say. Please don't manipulate the facts, because that's something that is of great concern. You're undermining society in an area where people have always lived together very happily. So this kind of speech is not appropriate in an elected institution. some of those asking questions were wondering how we could have a binding solidarity mechanism, or what we can't have is a la carte solidarity. Our organisation was very disappointed in the a la carte solidarity that member states have been offered so that they could choose whether to expel people or receive them. No. Solidarity needs to be joint in nature so that everyone shares the situation. The Canary Islands, Malta, etc. can't bear the burden alone. We are one single European Union, and we need to be responsible in a joint and solidarity-based manner. Now, to conclude, let me express our concern with regard to cooperation with third countries when it comes to signing agreements with countries where human rights are not respected. We don't want to repeat the kinds of agreements that were signed with Turkey or Libya. We don't want to see that repeated. Basically, all that happens is that one migration route closes at the cost of millions, and it's just reopened later on when another route closes. So this doesn't lead to any kind of appropriate situation. We need to improve local economies. That's an important task. And above all, we need to be responsible and ensure that international cooperation isn't based on conditions which lead countries outside the European Union becoming our border force. We need to respect human rights and act appropriately. We can't simply have one single solution based on border controls and expulsions. You know as well as I do, as well as we do, that migration policies are much wider ranging than that. We need to build an inclusive future which is based on social justice and joint responsibility, as we heard from the President of the Government of the Canary Islands. Because we're aware of the pressure that they're under given the migration to the Canary Islands. Measures need to be structural rather than temporary, and there needs to be a long-term view. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Galán. Thank you, President Victor Torres. Thank you, Commissioner.
Right in time. Besides, we have handled the always limited and restrictive timings of the works of the LIBE Committee in this afternoon session of ours, giving account of the situation of the migration route, the Atlantic migration route to the European Union via Canarias, through the Canary Islands. And we've done it right. I'm sure this conversation has been an illustration for the judgment of the members of the LIBE Committee, not only of those who are responsible of the relevant files of which the new Migration and Asylum Pact consists of, namely Eurodac, screening, asylum procedures, the new asylum and migration management regulation, and the crisis regulation, of which I am responsible as your rapporteur. Not only for all of us who have particular responsibilities on the handling of the component elements of the package, but for all of the members of the LIBE Committee to get to see how it is the situation in the Canary Islands as for now, and what is the level of European response which is still pending, particularly when it comes to articulating the solidarity and shared responsibility of which we have been talking of. So thank you, Commissioner Johansson. Gracias, Estrella Galán, Presidente Torres. That'll do for the time being for this point in the order of the day, and